I woke up on the hospital floor with my chest on fire. My daughter Melissa was screaming into her phone while Troy, her husband, stood behind her asking which hospital had the best cardiac unit. At the time, I thought he cared. I didn't know he was calculating how long I'd be unconscious. The paramedics strapped me to a gurney, and everything blurred into sirens and fluorescent lights. In the emergency room, they shoved papers in front of me, consent forms, insurance documents, medical releases. I signed everything through the haze of morphine and fear, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I trusted Melissa to read them for me. I trusted Troy to make sure I wasn't signing my life away. That trust cost me everything I'd built in 45 years. By the time they wheeled me into surgery, I'd already lost my house. I just didn't know it yet. Just before you continue to watch, Joe would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage him to keep his streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. All right, back to the story. The surgery took 6 hours. When I woke up, Melissa was holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, you scared us so much," she whispered, squeezing my fingers. Troy stood at the window, checking his phone. "The doctors said I was lucky. The heart attack could have killed me, but they'd cleared the blockage just in time. I'd need rest, monitoring, and absolutely no stress. Melissa promised she'd take care of everything while I recovered. She'd handle my mail, my bills, even water Carol's roses in the front yard. "Don't worry about a thing, Dad," she said, brushing hair from my forehead like she used when she was small. I closed my eyes, grateful to have family who cared. The machines beeped steadily around me, tracking my weak heartbeat. I didn't notice Troy smirking at his phone screen or the way Melissa glanced at him nervously when I wasn't looking. I was too busy trying to breathe without pain shooting through my chest. 2 weeks crawled by in that hospital bed. The doctors kept me longer than expected because my blood pressure wouldn't stabilize. Every morning, Melissa visited with flowers and updates about the house. "Everything's fine, Dad. The yard looks great. I even fixed that loose porch step you kept meaning to repair." Troy came less often, always rushing, always on his phone. When I finally got discharged, I was weak but desperate to see home. The brick house on Maple Street where Carol and I had raised Melissa, where we'd celebrated 40 anniversaries, where her laughter still echoed in every room. The cab driver helped me out at the curb, and I paid him with shaking hands. Then I looked up at my mailbox and froze. The name painted on the side wasn't mine. It said Holloway Family in neat blue letters. My cane clattered to the sidewalk. A young woman opened my front door, a baby on her hip and confusion on her face. "Can I help you?" she asked, stepping onto my porch. Behind her, I could see my living room, except it wasn't mine anymore. Different furniture, different curtains, a child's toy scattered across the floor where Carol's reading chair used to sit. "This is my house," I said, my voice cracking. She shook her head gently. "Sir, we bought this house 2 weeks ago. Are you lost? Do you need me to call someone?" Her husband appeared behind her, protective. I pulled out my wallet with trembling hands and showed them my driver's license. "This address, this is my home." Their faces shifted from confusion to pity. The woman disappeared inside and returned with a folder. "Maybe you should sit down," she said softly. She showed me the deed, the sale contract, the closing documents. My signature sat there in black ink, bold and clear. But I never signed those papers. I called Melissa from their kitchen table, my kitchen table that wasn't mine anymore. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the 3rd ring, breathless. "Dad, are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the house," I said slowly. "Our house, except there's a family living here who says they bought it from me." Silence stretched across the line. Then a heavy sigh. "Dad, please don't make a scene. I can explain everything. Just stay calm, okay?" My chest started hurting again. "Explain what, Melissa?" Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You couldn't live alone anymore. The doctors said you needed care. Troy handled everything while you were in surgery. We handled it. I gripped the phone tighter. You sold my house without telling me? Another pause. Then Troy's voice came on the line, sharp and cold. We used the money to upgrade our place. You can move in with us. You should be grateful, old man. I left the Holloway's house in a daze, apologizing for the confusion. They were kind, offering to let me take some personal items they'd found in the garage. I gathered a box of photos, Carol's jewelry box, and my old tool set. Everything else was gone. I sat in my Ford in the grocery store parking lot as the sun set, trying to understand how my own daughter could do this. The hospital papers I'd signed must have included a power of attorney. Troy had forged a sale document while I was unconscious, bleeding out on an operating table. My home, my memories, my wife's rose garden, sold for profit while I fought to stay alive. I couldn't go to their house, not yet. I couldn't face Melissa's betrayal or Troy's smug face. So I reclined the driver's seat, pulled Carol's photo from the box, and held it against my chest. The parking lot lights flickered on around me. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what to do. Tonight, I just needed to survive the heartbreak.
Morning came cold and stiff. My back ached from sleeping in the car, and my chest felt tight again. I drove to the auto shop where I'd worked for 30 years before retiring. My old friend Reggie still did bookkeeping in the office upstairs. When he saw me stumble in, he jumped up from his desk. "Harold, what happened to you?" I told him everything. He listened, his face darkening with each detail. Then he asked to see the documents the Holloways had shown me. I'd taken photos with my phone. Reggie pulled up my old signature from tax files and put them side by side. "Look here," he said, pointing at the loops. "Your signature curves up on the L in Lane. This one curves down. It's a forgery, Harold, a bad one." My hands started shaking again, but this time was something other than fear. What do I do? Reggie leaned back, thinking. We gather evidence. We stay quiet. Let them think you've given up. Then we bury them. I called Melissa that afternoon, forcing my voice to sound defeated. "You're right, sweetheart. Maybe I can't live alone anymore. Can I stay with you for a while?" Relief flooded her voice. "Of course, Dad. We've got plenty of room. Troy's excited to have you." That was a lie, but I let it slide. She picked me up an hour later, chattering nervously about their new house, the neighborhood, the schools nearby. When we pulled up to a sprawling 2-story with a 3-car garage, my stomach turned. This place cost at least twice what my house was worth. We walked inside, and I stopped dead in the entryway. My grandfather clock stood against the wall, the one Carol's father had built by hand in 1943. "You took my clock," I said quietly. Melissa wouldn't meet my eyes. "We didn't want your stuff to get thrown out." Troy appeared on the staircase, grinning. "Welcome home, Pops." I smiled back and let him carry my suitcase upstairs. The guest room was nice, too nice. Expensive bedding, a flat-screen TV, furniture that still had tags on it, all bought with my money. I unpacked slowly, placing Carol's photo on the nightstand. Then I walked through the house, cataloging everything. My leather recliner in the den, Carol's china cabinet in the dining room, my workbench in the garage, even the paintings from our bedroom hung in their hallway. They'd gutted my life and redecorated theirs with the pieces. Melissa found me staring at the china cabinet. "We just didn't want it to go to waste," she murmured, wringing her hands. I touched the glass door gently. Carol spent 10 years collecting these plates. She'd serve Christmas dinner on them. Carol's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. That night, while they slept, I took the small camera Reggie had given me and positioned it behind the grandfather clock. The lens was tiny, almost invisible. It had a clear view of the living room and kitchen.
The first few days, I played the role of the grateful, confused old man. I let Troy help me to the bathroom. I let Melissa cut my food at dinner. I asked simple questions and pretended to forget their answers. At night, I reviewed the camera footage on my laptop. Mostly boring, TV shows, meal prep, Melissa scrolling through her phone. Then, on the third night, I caught them arguing. It was past midnight, and I'd pretended to take my medication and go to bed early. Their voices rose from the kitchen, sharp and tense. "He's staying too long," Troy hissed. "The deal's done. Why is he still here?" Melissa's voice cracked. "He's my father, Troy. We can't just kick him out." "He won't be our problem much longer." My blood went cold. I saved the file and sent it to Reggie immediately. Then I lay awake until dawn, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the darkness. Reggie called me at 6 in the morning, his voice tight. "Harold, you need to be careful. That recording, they're planning something, maybe another medical emergency." I thought about the pills Melissa had been giving me at night, the ones she said were my heart medication. "I need to fake a collapse," I said. "Get them to show their hand." Reggie was quiet for a long moment. "That's dangerous. If you're wrong—" "I'm not wrong. You heard Troy. I won't be their problem much longer." That afternoon, I pretended to nap on the living room couch. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, close enough for the camera to catch every word. "He won't survive another attack anyway," Melissa said, her voice breaking. "We just have to wait." Troy's response was colder. "Or we could help it along. Stress triggers, arguments, maybe forget a medication dose." I lay perfectly still, my heart pounding against my ribs. That night at dinner, I made my move. Halfway through the meal, I dropped my fork and clutched my chest, gasping. Melissa screamed. Troy jumped up, but I saw him hesitate, just for a second, calculating. Dad, stay with me!" Melissa was crying, shaking my shoulders. I let my eyes roll back and went limp against the chair. "Call 911, she screamed at Troy. He pulled out his phone slowly, too slowly. I held my breath and stayed motionless. "He's not breathing," Troy said, putting his hand on my neck. "I think he's gone." Then I opened my eyes and looked directly at him. "Not yet." Melissa gasped. Troy stepped back, his face going pale. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, and I calmly told them I'd had a dizzy spell but felt fine now. Then I asked them to call Detective Harlan. Troy's expression shifted from shock to fear in an instant.
Detective Harlan had helped me years ago when someone broke into my garage and stole Carol's jewelry. He was retired now, but still kept his badge for consulting work. He arrived an hour after the paramedics left, his gray hair thinner but his eyes still sharp. I took him into the guest room and showed him everything: the forged deed, the recordings, the evidence Reggie had compiled. Harlan listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each revelation. "This is elder fraud," he said finally. "Potentially attempted murder if we can prove they were tampering with your medication." He glanced toward the door where Troy was lurking in the hallway. "I'll need to set up surveillance, real surveillance, not just your camera. Can you keep pretending?" I nodded. "How long?" He smiled faintly. "Just long enough for them to hang themselves. I'll get a warrant for hidden cameras. Sit tight, Harold." Troy tried to look innocent when Harlan left, asking if everything was okay. I just smiled and said I'd had a scare but was feeling better. For the next 3 days, I was the perfect house guest. I thanked Melissa for every meal and let Troy check my blood pressure morning and night. I even apologized for causing trouble with my dizzy spell. "I just want to be less of a burden," I said sadly. Melissa hugged me tight. "You're not a burden, Dad. You're family." But the cameras Harlan installed told a different story. They caught Troy making phone calls late at night, whispering about timelines and payouts. They caught Melissa pacing the kitchen, wringing her hands and crying when she thought no one was watching. I kept a notebook by my bed, writing down observations, times, and dates. It looked like a journal to anyone who peeked inside. It was actually a detailed log of evidence for the prosecutor. On the 4th day, Troy made a phone call that changed everything. I was pretending to nap in my room when I heard his voice through the air vent. "It's done," Troy said into his phone, thinking I was asleep upstairs. "We can claim medical neglect, get him moved to a nursing home, then sell the car, liquidate the rest. Should clear another $30,000 easy." I grabbed my phone and texted Harlan immediately. He responded in seconds, recording it, "Stay calm." I lay perfectly still, listening as Troy continued. "The old man won't fight it. He's already confused half the time. We'll have full control by next month." When he hung up, I heard him pour himself a drink and toast to thin air. "To easy money," he muttered. Harlan called me 10 minutes later. "We've got enough, but I need one more thing. Can you leave a fake will somewhere visible? Something that makes them think they've already won." I smiled grimly. "Consider it done." That evening, I wrote out a document by hand and left it on the kitchen counter. The fake will was simple and devastating. "To my beloved daughter Melissa and her husband Troy, I leave everything. You've earned it by caring for me in my final days." I even signed it with a shaky hand and dated it that morning. Then I left it folded on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker, where Troy would definitely find it. He did, within an hour. I watched through the hidden camera as he unfolded it, read it twice, and broke into a grin. "Finally," he whispered under his breath. He poured himself a glass of wine and called Melissa into the kitchen. She read it and started crying. "Troy, this doesn't feel right. Maybe we should—" "Should what? Give back the house? He signed it, Melissa. It's done." They toasted with wine, and I watched from the laptop in my room, recording every second. Harlan was watching too, streaming the feed in real time. He texted me one word: "Tomorrow." The police arrived at dawn. I was already awake, dressed, and sitting calmly in the kitchen with my coffee when I heard the knock. Troy stumbled downstairs in his robe, confused and angry. Melissa appeared behind him, her face pale. "What's going on?" Troy demanded as he opened the door. Detective Harlan stood on the porch with 4 uniformed officers. "Troy Bennett, you're under arrest for elder fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation." The color drained from Troy's face. "This is insane! You can't!" They handcuffed him right there in the doorway while Melissa screamed, begging them to stop. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, please, tell them this is a mistake. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Harlan dropped a folder on the kitchen table. Inside were copies of the forged deed, the recordings, and a document showing Melissa's signature on the sale contract. She stared at it, her hands shaking. "I signed that," she whispered. The trial took 3 months. I sat through every hearing, every motion, every moment of testimony. Troy's lawyer tried to argue that I'd been mentally confused, that I'd agreed to sell the house and simply forgotten. My cardiologist testified that my cognitive function was perfect. Reggie presented the forensic analysis of the forged signature. The Holloways testified that they'd bought the house in good faith, but never met me during the sale, only Troy. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict clearly. Guilty on all counts. Troy showed no emotion, but his lawyer slumped in his seat. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Melissa's trial was separate and shorter. Her lawyer argued that she'd been manipulated and controlled by Troy for years. She took the stand and testified through tears about how he'd isolated her from friends, controlled their bank accounts, and threatened to leave her if she didn't cooperate. "I just wanted him to love me," she whispered. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor presented evidence of Melissa's involvement, her signature on documents, her presence at meetings, her knowledge of the sale. But they also presented text messages showing Troy threatening her, verbally abusing her, and manipulating her emotions. The judge reviewed everything carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm but not unkind. "Ms. Lane, you are not blameless in this crime. However, the evidence suggests you were under significant coercion. I'm sentencing you to 5 years probation, community service, and mandatory therapy."
Melissa collapsed in her chair, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry." I stood up from the gallery, my chest tight. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Lane, do you wish to make a statement?" I nodded slowly. "Your Honor, I'd like to request that my daughter serve her probation under my supervision at my home." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You understand what you're asking?" "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "She's my daughter. She made terrible choices, but she's still my daughter. If she's willing to work for forgiveness, I'm willing to offer it." The judge granted the request with strict conditions. Melissa would live with me, attend therapy twice a week, and complete 500 hours of community service. If she violated any terms, she'd serve her sentence in prison. 3 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of my brick house on Maple Street. The courts had rescinded the sale, and the Holloways had been compensated from Troy's seized assets. The house was mine again, but it felt empty. Dust covered the floors. Carol's rose bushes in the front yard were dead, their branches brittle and brown. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I scrubbed floors, patched walls, and replanted the garden. I was outside pulling weeds when I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. Melissa stood at the gate, 2 suitcases at her feet and tears on her face. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. She'd lost weight, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked like the little girl who used to help me in the garage, handing me wrenches and asking 1,000 questions. "Yes," I said finally, "but there are rules." She nodded quickly. "Anything. I'll do anything. You'll help me restore this house. Every repair, every corner, every single thing that was broken. You'll learn to fix it yourself." She swallowed hard. "Okay. And you'll visit your mother's grave every Sunday with me. You'll tell her what you've learned." Her voice broke. "Okay, Daddy." We worked side by side for weeks. I taught her how to sand floors, replace baseboards, and mix concrete for the cracked driveway. She worked without complaining, her hands blistering and healing again. We didn't talk much at first. The silence was heavy but necessary.
One afternoon, Melissa was cleaning out the garage when she found an old wooden box tucked behind paint cans. "Dad, what's this?" she called out. I came over and recognized it immediately. Carol's memory box. Inside were letters, photos, and small mementos from our 40 years together. Melissa opened it carefully and pulled out an envelope with her name on it. "Mom wrote this?" she whispered. I nodded. "She wrote one for both of us before she passed. I never gave you yours because, well, I thought you'd find it when you were ready." She opened it with trembling hands and read aloud through tears. "My darling Melissa, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to remember something important. Home is not a place you own. It's a place you build with love. If you ever lose your way, come home. That's where love starts again." Melissa broke down, pressing the letter to her chest. That night, she planted new roses by the porch, working in the moonlight until her hands were covered in dirt. Things were finally starting to heal. Melissa finished her community service hours at a senior center, helping elderly residents with repairs and home maintenance. She told me she'd started to understand what she'd taken from me. Not just a house, but safety, dignity, and trust. Then one morning, I received a letter from the county property office. I opened it at the kitchen table, expecting routine paperwork. Instead, my hands started shaking. "Pending transfer authorization to Melissa Lane," it read. The house title was being processed for transfer again. Melissa walked in and saw my face. "Dad, what's wrong?" I showed her the letter, and her expression shifted from confusion to panic. No, I didn't file that. I swear I didn't." I believed her, which meant someone else did. "Troy," we said at the same time. I called Harlan immediately. He was already investigating. He's been making moves from prison, forged documents again, using contacts on the outside. Harlan worked fast.
They traced the paperwork to a paralegal who'd been bribed to file fake transfer documents. Troy had orchestrated the whole thing through smuggled letters and phone calls, still trying to get his hands on what wasn't his. When Harlan confronted him in prison, Troy just smiled. That house should have been mine from the start. Old man didn't deserve it. The paralegal confessed and was arrested. Troy's sentence was extended by another 7 years. But I realized something sitting in Harlan's office that day. As long as my name was on that deed, someone would always try to take it. Troy, future scammers, even well-meaning social workers who thought I was too old to live alone. I needed to make a decision that would protect the house forever. So I called Reggie and my lawyer and told them what I wanted to do. Melissa sat beside me, listening quietly. When I finished explaining, she nodded slowly. "I understand, Dad. I think it's perfect."
A week later, I sat in a law office and signed a living trust. The house would remain mine for as long as I lived. But after my death, it wouldn't go to Melissa or any individual. It would be transferred to the Ohio Veterans Foundation to be used as transitional housing for homeless veterans. Reggie witnessed the signature. My lawyer filed it with the county that afternoon. I told Melissa over dinner that night, watching her reaction carefully. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled sadly. Mom would have loved that. "You're not upset?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't deserve it, Dad, and honestly, I don't want it. It would just remind me of what I almost destroyed." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'd rather earn something myself, the way you and Mom did." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The house was safe, Melissa was healing, and Troy would rot in prison knowing he'd lost everything. A year passed. I built a workshop behind the house, converting the old shed into a space for teaching. Every Saturday, young mechanics from the community college came to learn how to rebuild engines, fix transmissions, and restore classic cars. Melissa volunteered every week, handing out tools and learning alongside them. She'd started taking night classes in social work, wanting to help families avoid the kind of manipulation she'd fallen into. Carol's roses bloomed again, bright red and fragrant. I tended them every morning, talking to her like she was still sitting on the porch with her coffee. The grandfather clock still stood in the hallway, ticking softly. Sometimes I'd stop and listen to it, remembering the night it recorded everything that saved my life. Melissa framed Carol's letter and hung it by the front door. Every time we left the house, we'd touch it gently, a reminder of where love lived. People ask me sometimes if I regretted letting Melissa stay, if I should have let her serve prison time instead. I'd just smile and say, forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we choose to give. My heart was stronger now, literally and figuratively. The doctors were amazed at my recovery. I told them I had something to live for again. Teaching, building, and watching my daughter become the person Carol always believed she could be. One evening, as the sun set over the rose garden, Melissa and I sat on the porch in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Dad, do you think Mom would forgive me?" I looked at her, at the woman who'd betrayed me and then spent a year trying to make it right. She already has, sweetheart, and so have I. The grandfather clock chimed inside, marking another hour survived, another moment of grace. And if you ever sell a man's house while he's in the hospital, just remember, he might not be as helpless as you think, and he might just move into yours. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.